And a good day to you all. Today we have a shack on a hill, or an artist with a view, or both. This is a 7 by 9 sheet of. I'm going to post the paper. It's supposed to be a cold pressed paper, but it's terribly soft. It's almost like a hot pressed, and it's really nice to work with. I'm going to post a picture of it to show you. I can't remember the name of it. So I'm just wetting the background with the hockey brush, and there's the paper there. Not terribly expensive, but I actually kind of like it because the ink works well on it, and the paint really seems to take to it as well. So as mentioned, I wet the background with the hockey brush, and I just painted around the shack, and this time around decided to paint through the entire background, cover the trees and everything with this combination of cadmium yellow and cadmium orange hue, whatever that means. Using my 12 brush, loading it up, 12 round brush, loading it up, and just trying to create a sky. I'm going to have a bit of purple in there, but I kind of wanted to have a glow around this cottage. My objective today was to have a relatively dark shadow on the one side of that cottage and make cottage or shack, and have it really stand out as, I'm just trying to create a bit of mood is what I'm doing. So once it's dried, I can do a little bit of inking. So this is one of my paintings where I go wash, then ink, then wash, then ink, then wash, then ink. That's the kind of thing I'll be doing today. So I'll speed this up a bit. I'm just doing a bit of inking here because I lost my little deck, and I just wanted to outline the easel, my little art guy. Had some questions about the pen. That's the Lamy Safari with the extra fine nib, and the ink this go around is the Diatramentus document ink. And as you can see, I went in with the cadmium yellow, and I touched the ink, and there was no bleed whatsoever. The paper is really absorbent. It's really quite nice to work with, and now that I'm watching this, I think I might go get myself some more of that. Oh, by the way, it came on a block, and I just lifted it off the block and taped it down. It's small, so I didn't need to stretch it or do anything like that with it. So my foreground, or my hill underneath the shack, was a cadmium yellow, and I used a bit of olive green just to darken up the foreground, and then I'm going to use a bit of purple. Now I think I'm going to do this one in layers. So I'll do a bit of glazing and then leave it, and then come back and add some more color to it. So there, with it dry, as you can see, it dried quite a bit lighter. And deciding to go right in with the trees. So this, you've seen this routine before. It's the mop brush. I load it up with cadmium yellow, and I'm painting around the shack at this point, but more or less just laying the brush on its side, the fat part of the brush, and letting let the paint get onto the paper, and trying to make the it's a made-up tree, so I'm trying to make it look to really help the composition. I don't want to have a big marshmallow on the top there and appears if I don't know what I'm doing. So there we go with a nice wet mixture of cadmium yellow, and I'm dropping in sap green. Now I want to try something different. I have overlapping trees here, so I have to deal with that. I have this tree which is kind of ahead of the tree to the right. So right now I'm just trying to figure out how I'm going to deal with that, how I'm going to separate the two trees. My board's on a tilt, so everything I drop in is just going to run down a little bit. When I say tilt for my board, it's like, I don't know, 15 degrees or something like that. As a kid, I used to do all my drawing and painting on like a kitchen table on a flat surface, so I never really got into that complete upright type of painting or drawing. I've tried it a couple of times, but I'm way more comfortable when things are I'm kind of over top of the image, and I have a little more control. I feel as if I have more control. So there to darken up the underside of the tree, I went in with some purple. Trying some different colors here, trying to create a different mood for this painting. And I'm going to do the same process over here while that tree is wet. And there, same thing. So I did the tree with the yellow, the olive green, and grabbing some of that purple down there. And here comes the salt. Now I've lost my little tree over at the right, so here I come in with the ink and just to define things. So they're just mapping out my shack a little bit more. Gives me a little bit of time. As I draw it, I get to think about what colors I'm going to use and that sort of thing. Now here's trying to separate the tree, so I'm painting around that the tree immediately in front of it, and trying not to paint over it so I don't get that hard line. I will be inking these afterwards, so it's not as big a deal, but I'm trying to put in a little darker colors just to separate the two trees. Yeah, here I'm going in with the olive green and the purple. So with everything dried, I can see that my tree's kind of separated, but not really, so the ink is going to have to come in and define them. Now this location, again made up, kind of like the idea of a little rocky hill, some nice grasses and trees. So I'm putting rocks on the left-hand side here. And of course it helps me, with the composition, helps me break up that mound. And I'm just dropping in a collection of ultramarine, burnt sienna, and a bit of the muck from the other side there, a bit of the purples as well. And I just want to more or less darken the immediate foreground, because I'm looking at it now and I'm thinking I want the light to be coming more or less from behind the artist, so it's either a sunset or a sunrise type of thing. So it's throwing a bit of light at the top of the hill, and then the foreground's going to be a little bit darker. And there I can come in with some more purples and Payne's gray to just darken that up even more. So now I've got my building, my little shack, almost completely inked. I can get down to the business of painting it now. So this is just like a stack coming off of a wood stove on the inside. So it's kind of like a metal stainless steel type of thing, aluminum or whatever it would be. So I'm painting in a metal color. So I actually used a bit of Windsor blue, a bit of Payne's gray, and a bit of burnt sienna for my my rusty bits. And when I had that color out, I started to look at the rocks and I thought they could use a bit of shadow work. They're kind of blending in with the ground, so I'm just adding a bit of shadow under the rocks. And they're helping me to find those rocks over there on the left. Now I'm attempting to load up my rigger brush here to do the smaller branches at the top. And it's a pretty dark mixture. It's Payne's gray, bit of ultramarine in there, or Payne's Gray, sorry, burnt sienna. And I made it fairly wet, so I started at the middle and worked my way up. And then I'm just kind of moving the colors around in there so it doesn't look too brown. I wanted to have a bit of a greeny gray look to it. And using the same colors over here. And that's just some Payne's Gray in there at the base of it to give it a bit of shadow and a bit of depth or volume. So all the while I'm painting these trunks, I'm wondering what I'm going to do with the shack. I think when I set out, I wanted to create a bit of mood, so I wanted the shack to be like, I know it's sitting on top of the hill, but it's like one of those old fish huts where it's kind of a bluey gray color. And of course the right side of it being shadow, so I have to figure out what to do with the colors there. Now here I'm just going wet on dry. I've just got a really pretty thick mixture of whatever color that is in the middle. Looks like it's an olive green, and it's got a bit of the purple in it as well. And I'm just painting, what's the term again? Yeah, wet on dry. Going right after the bottom of the tree there. At the upper edges of the paint, I'm just adding a bit of water and softening the edges a bit so it's not too hard. So it doesn't look like I came in and painted them afterwards. So I'm probably going to soften the edges here once I get that painted in. A little bit of water, and yeah, that's what I'm doing. Yeah, the foreground was a bit washed out. There was no definition there. It didn't separate the middle of the hill from the immediate foreground. So it looks like I've gone in with some pretty dark olive green and Payne's Gray and some purple. And there I got my fan brush, which I seldom use. And I'm just dragging a bit of the paint upwards. Give it a grassy look. Just soften the edge in there a bit. Now with it dry, I went in with a raw sienna for the deck part because it's being hit by the light, so I didn't want to make it too dark. Yeah, there's a bit of burnt sienna. It's still wet, so I got burnt sienna and a bit of raw sienna. And while that was drying, I decided to go in and get after that tree at the front. Same approach, I got my 6 round, great control with that brush, and just going in with some olive green and a bit of the purple, got that nice dark mixture there. So they're just softening the edges of that. And hopefully I left it, yes I did. So when the deck or the porch or whatever you want to call it sticking out from the ground there dried, I can go in and add the shadow for the underside. So I'm grabbing my shadow mix, which is, I got a bit of purple in with some ultramarine. Now if I decide to go with like that bluey color for the wood of the shack, I'm going to have to make the shadow a lot darker on the second pass. And that about does it. So it's casting a bit of shadow down that side of the hill. Okay, so I let that dry. And now the light's going to be hitting that roof there. So I have like a yellowy orange sky. So I'm going to make the roof, oops. I'm going to make the roof a cadmium yellow to start with. That'll be the undercolor. And while that's settling in and drying, get the pen out and just work my way around the tree. Really loose stroke, just holding the pen very loosely. So his door is wide open. Don't ask me where he sleeps in there. Let's say he sleeps, he's got a loft up in the top, which would be, by the looks of it, would be crazy hot in there. But his door is wide open, so I'm just painting the Payne's Gray on the inside of the door to show the inside of his shack. And I let it dry, and I'm going to get that other tree inked. Added a bit of burnt sienna, give it a bit of wear. And that will be the lighter side of the building, so I got to be careful not to paint it too blue. And here, the shadow side, I can go in with the ultramarine and really darken it up. I'm using the same colors over on that side of the building, the burnt sienna, which I had on the front. So I'm just throwing that into the blues on the right, the shadow side. And here I'm just lifting out, trying to lift out some paint, because the building itself got a little bit dark there, and I'm trying to distinguish between the shadow side and the front. So I let it dry. It was getting a bit too mucky in there, so I decided to let it dry and then go back in and add a really rich shadow color, which is ultramarine, and there's some purple in there as well. This way, rather than lifting and lifting and lifting, once it's dry, I can just go in and do wet on dry with my 6 round. I have control with that, so I can just paint nice straight lines. And I think I've done it there. I've got the side separated from the front. And with that little splash of light on the top of the hill, it creates a nice contrast. A lot of fussing going on with the shadows, but I didn't want to have wanted to have a kind of a consistent color throughout. That's why I was mopping and moving it around. So with my shadow paint, I can go in. I noticed I could add a little more shadow to the rocks in the foreground. They weren't really defined, and now they're starting to get a bit of volume and a bit of depth to them. And there's my my weathered boards going in. So for the last little bit, we'll get our plein air painter, our artist done. Standard mustard yellow pants. Using a bit of orange for his skin tones. Very little, I mean, it's a tiny little painting, so you don't have to overdo it, just a bit of orange. And I'm putting a nice red flannel shirt on him. So I've talked at length about my my mustard pants and my my childhood memories of mustard bathing suit and mustard pants. I've also got a few memories of the flannel shirt as well. So that's a red flannel shirt. It's a bit plain right now, and I'm going to add a bit of check to it. Get a real Canadian look. Now here's the pastel pencil. Just a few little highlights. Lights hitting a few spots there, hitting the metal at the top and just the very top of the rocks. didn't go on very well. So look, I'm using a bit of white gouache there for the top part. Separate that that pipe from the trees. Be careful not to overdo it. Once you get that white paint out, it's yeah, there's a bit of metal on the rain barrel there, so I'm just putting a bit. Got to be careful. Walk away, Gary. A little bit on his little water bottle. Now we can get this big green hat in. And I didn't want to use my big pen to finish this up. I didn't want it to be too cartoony. So I'm using my Rotring 0.25 as a, yeah, it looks like the 0.25, just to do a very simple outline around the guy, not too much detail. Indication of a paintbrush. He's staying hydrated. He's got a little water bottle out there. And of course, you can also dip his brushes in there if he wanted to. And there's the tin roof, just putting a few details on. Not overdoing it. And here comes the plaid for the flannel shirt. Every time my dad went fishing, he had that plaid flannel shirt on, it seemed, at least that's what I remember. So I'm putting a little painting on his painting. I always like that look. So you look really close at it, you can see this guy's painting hills in the distance. And here are the final little bits. Draw a little bit of bark, add a few branches. A couple little rocks, get it signed. Let's get the tape off it and have a look. Yeah, a bit of a tear there. That's the paper. That's got to be careful with that. It went a little too quick and I tore the paper a bit. There you have it. A shack on a hill, painter with a view, and a combination of both. Thanks for dropping by, and we'll see you again soon.